The front door swung open on a creak that didn't belong there. Carol stepped cautiously into the house, calling out her husband's name. No answer. The lights were off. Rainwater trickled onto the hardwood through a broken window. The frame was jagged, shards of glass scattered like crystal confetti. Drawers were yanked out, cushions torn, the kind of mess made by someone who wasn't looking for money but meaning. Then she saw the study door ajar, the outline of the safe on the far wall. Her heart dropped. It had been opened. Perfectly, carefully, like someone had the code. She stepped closer, expecting the worst, but it was all still there. The emergency cash, the faded passport, the boring papers no thief would want. Except one thing, new, unfamiliar. A yellow envelope placed dead center on the top shelf. Her name, handwritten in blocky, familiar letters. If someone else found this first, I failed. She stood there in the dim room, rain pounding on the roof. The word failed, burning in her ears. The envelope trembled in her hand. She hadn't even cried yet. 3 months earlier. Mr. Johnson sat still as stone. The doctor across from him kept talking, but the words blurred together. Stage 4. Melanoma. 6 weeks, maybe less. It was the maybe that felt cruelest. The room smelled faintly of antiseptic and printer toner. The air conditioning buzzed. Mr. Johnson didn't blink. He simply nodded once, as if agreeing to an appointment that would never arrive. Outside, the world kept moving. Cars, people, the scent of roasting corn from the street vendor on the corner. He stood beneath the clouded sky and thought only one thing. Don't go home with this. Not yet. He parked in front of the house and watched the lights through the front window. Carol's silhouette passed in the kitchen, setting plates, humming. Their home glowed. The smell of something warm floated through the slightly cracked window basil, tomato, the familiar comfort of a normal Wednesday. He didn't move, just stared at the front door. He'd opened that door 1,000 times. Now it felt like a lie. That night, over dinner, Carol told him about their daughter's latest job application and the neighbour's ridiculous dog and the woman who sang off-key at church last Sunday. Mr. Johnson nodded, smiled, even laughed once. He poured the wine, passed the bread, but his eyes lingered on her. Not lovingly, not wistfully, memorizing. She caught him once. "What?" she asked, half smiling. "Just listening," he said. She reached for his hand. "You've always been good at that." He squeezed back. His hand trembled only slightly. That night, he sat in the garage with an old spiral notebook and a ballpoint pen that kept skipping. To do: cancel insurance policies, move to Carol's name, move bank accounts into joint access, leave instructions for safe, sell the mower. Letter 1, emergency. Letter 2, after I go. Letter 3, when she's angry. Letter 4, when she's lonely, pay off the house. He stared at the last one, circled it twice. He moved like a man straightening a tablecloth before the bomb underneath went off. He cleared browser histories, labelled folders, rewrote passwords into a code only she could crack based on old anniversaries and inside jokes. He made sure the utility bills were moved to autopay, unsubscribed from the newsletters she hated, closed old bank accounts, sold the ladder he'd promised to replace for 2 years. To Carol, It looked like an unusually productive month. To Mr. Johnson, it was the first phase of disappearing cleanly. They lay in bed that night, her head on his shoulder, his arm numb. He didn't move it. "You were quiet today," she said. "Was I?" He smiled faintly. "Just tired. Long week. It's Tuesday." He chuckled. She smiled. The moment passed, but long after she drifted off, he remained awake, staring at the ceiling as if waiting for it to collapse. At his brother's bedside in the hospital, they didn't speak of dying. Not directly. His brother looked worse than last time. His voice rasped like sandpaper when he said, "So, what are the odds one of us goes first?" Mr. Johnson grinned. "You always did win at everything." His brother winced, then laughed. Then silence. There were no goodbyes between them, only men trying to act like they weren't afraid. He waited until she left for her sisters. In the study, he opened the safe, punching in the digits like muscle memory. He placed the envelope inside, labelled neatly, folded exactly in thirds. "If someone else found this first, I failed." He hesitated before closing the door. This wasn't just paper, it was a lifeline, his voice, a map for her to follow. And it had to be hidden, somewhere she'd never check until she had to. He shut the safe, spun the dial, and stood back. Then he exhaled. The living room smelled faintly of varnish. Mr. Johnson had repainted the old window frames that week. The wood had started to splinter, but that wasn't why he did it. He was preparing the house the way someone might prepare an altar, quietly, lovingly. He fixed the faulty light switch in the hallway, tightened the screws on the pantry door, replaced the batteries in the smoke alarms. Carol joked he was nesting. "Are we expecting company?" she teased, brushing his arm as he reached under the sink. "You never know," he said without looking up. He didn't mean guests, he meant grief, and he didn't want it to find her in a broken house. Every night, after she went to bed, he walked the house, not to check locks or windows, but to listen. To how the floorboards creaked when she wasn't walking on them, to how the silence settled on furniture like dust, to how the wind sounded through the back gutter he never had time to fix. He made these walks part of his rhythm, like a ghost rehearsing his future. Once, he paused outside the bedroom door and placed his palm flat against it. "I'm still here," he whispered, even though he wouldn't be. The second letter went inside her winter coat pocket, the one she never wore unless it truly snowed. It read, "You'll wear this when the world feels cold. Let this warm you twice." The third went inside a book she always meant to finish. "You stopped here last time. Don't stop again. Not now." The fourth was trickier. It needed to be found when she felt lost, but not too soon. He placed it behind the cereal boxes, where it might fall during a rushed morning. "Yes, this is real. You're still breathing. That's enough today." He didn't write all of them at once. He waited until the mood struck him, until the right sentence came. Each letter was a different version of him, some joking, some gentle, some proud, all loving. The early superannuation release came through. It felt like robbing his own future, but it was the only way. He used it to pay off the house, quietly, without telling her, without ceremony. He wanted the roof over her head to be more than shelter. He wanted it to be certainty. The bank called to confirm. He nodded through the phone and hung up without smiling. That Friday night, they slow danced in the living room. No music, just the hum of the fridge and the flicker of lamplight. She held on to him like it was nothing special. He held on to her like it was the last dance at the end of the world. She laid her head on his shoulder. "You smell like dust," she muttered. "It's the cologne of men with secrets." She laughed. He didn't. He almost said it, almost opened his mouth to tell her everything. But instead, he kissed her forehead and whispered, "I hope this is the version of me you remember." She furrowed her brow. "What?" "Nothing," he smiled. "Just practicing for when I'm old and poetic." Carol noticed he'd sold the mower, then the ladder, then the old set of tools he used to swear he'd never part with. He said he was downsizing, said it was time to live simpler, said she always wanted him to declutter. It wasn't untrue, it just wasn't the truth. She didn't press, but at night she stared at the ceiling beside him and wondered if there was something he wasn't saying. Mr. Johnson began to move slower. Subtle things. He reached for painkillers more often, winced getting out of the car, began forgetting what he was saying halfway through stories. Once, in the middle of boiling water for tea, he just stood there, still, like he'd lost time. Carol caught him. "You okay?" He looked startled, then smiled. "I was remembering something. That trip to Ghana, the one with the taxi that broke down." She squinted at him. "We never went to Ghana." He blinked, swallowed. Right, must have dreamed it. She watched him the rest of the night, saying nothing, but something inside her had shifted. On his final Sunday, with enough strength, he cleaned the shed. It took him 6 hours. He labelled every container, lined every nail in rows, wrote down how to use the trimmer, changed the oil in the generator, replaced every screw in the workbench. It looked like a display in a hardware store. He stood in the center, breathing heavily, and whispered, "Now you don't need me here." Then he closed the door behind him. For the last time, he knew it had to go there. The letter she would need if the worst came suddenly. If she came home and found nothing but echoes. He placed it in the safe, sealed in plastic, next to old documents and expired passport. If someone else found this first, I failed. It was dramatic. He knew that. But he couldn't shake the feeling that he might not go gently. And if something shattered, if life broke open suddenly, he needed her to have something intact. He spun the dial and pressed his hand flat to the metal door. "Don't open it until you have to," he said aloud, and walked away. The kitchen calendar still showed the month of April. Carol had meant to change it, but Mr. Johnson always did that. It was now early June. He had stopped doing small things, not because he forgot, but because the body had begun making its own rules. His fingers tingled most mornings. The stairs seemed taller than before. His mind, once quick as a whip, now stalled like an engine in winter. He smiled through it, always. But he was no longer memorizing Carol. He was saying goodbye to the world in pieces. He left at dawn without telling her. Drove the long road out toward the coast, the one they used to take on holidays when the kids were younger. The sun hadn't yet risen. Fog clung to the trees. The wind rattled through the open window like it had something to say. He parked near the edge of a hill and stood outside the car, wrapped in an old sweater, watching the sky bleed into day. It didn't feel like a goodbye. It felt like a handshake with silence. Carol found him asleep on the porch later that afternoon. He'd curled up in the chair he always swore was too stiff, a blanket around his shoulders, a mug of tea, cold, half full beside him. She sat next to him quietly, watched his chest rise and fall. Then she noticed Ether's hands. They were shaking. Not from cold, but from something else. She didn't say anything. Not yet. But in her gut, a shape began to form, a whisper she didn't want to hear. That night, he sat her down in the study. No ceremony, no grand announcement. He simply said, "I've been preparing." She blinked. "For what?" He looked down, swallowed. "For you, for after." Carol stared at him. The words didn't land at first, as if he were speaking a foreign language. Then, "Are you? Is this?" He nodded once. Slowly. "It's not a surprise anymore, to me." She didn't cry. Not then. Just shook her head like she could shake away the meaning. "Why wouldn't you tell me?" He didn't answer, but his eyes did. Carol spent the next day in silence. He watched her drift from room to room like a ghost wearing her own skin. She didn't shout, didn't fall apart. But she didn't touch him either. The space between them became sacred and heavy. She found the first letter that night, tucked inside her recipe book. "This one's for the days you hate me for not saying it sooner." She clutched it in her hands for nearly an hour before opening it. Inside was a short note. "I needed you to smile for a few more days, to laugh without flinching. I needed to feel what it was like to be married to you without death between us." That was when she broke. Mr. Johnson visited his father for the last time on a Wednesday. The old man looked at him like he already knew. "You're limping," his father said. "I'm still faster than you." They laughed quietly. They sat in silence for nearly 20 minutes. Then his father leaned forward, gripping his hand. "Leave something behind that isn't heavy." He did not explain. He didn't have to. He didn't forget them. One letter each, all handwritten, all labelled by milestone. For weddings, for heartbreaks, for the day they questioned everything. He sealed them with wax, marked them with years he wouldn't see. Each letter held a part of him he could not give in person, but would give anyway. He left them in the attic, inside an old shoebox that once held Carol's wedding shoes. He wrote the final letter 3 days before he passed. It wasn't long. It was a single sentence. "If you're reading this, I'm not gone. I'm just on the other side of where you can reach." He folded it slowly, like a ritual, like prayer. He placed it inside the safe, just in case. He woke with a fever, too weak to stand. Carol sat beside him, her hand in his, her eyes red but calm. He whispered things she barely heard, called her by the old nickname he hadn't used in years, said thank you, said sorry, said nothing that could carry the full weight of love, but tried anyway. And then, on a quiet Tuesday, Mr. Johnson took his last breath. No drama, no struggle, just a man who had already done most of his leaving long before his heart gave out. The house was too quiet now. Even the walls seemed to hold their breath. After the funeral, Carol wandered from room to room like she was trying to catch him hiding in a doorway just out of sight. The kitchen still smelled faintly of cinnamon. His slippers were still by the side of the bed. His sweater still draped over the back of the chair. He always scolded her for cluttering. She couldn't bring herself to touch anything, because moving one thing meant moving on. It was 3 days after the funeral when she remembered the safe. She almost didn't open it, but something about the silence too sharp, too thick pushed her there. Inside, everything was the same. The passports, the cash, the documents, and one yellow envelope. Her name. Again? If someone else found this first, I failed. But no one else had. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. You made it here. I'm proud of you. That means the worst has already passed. If you're reading this, it means the world didn't stop, just changed shape. She read the letter twice. Then she read it out loud. And that's when she wept, not because he was gone, but because she could still hear him. They didn't come all at once. They came like flares in the fog. The first was inside the cereal box, just like he planned. Yes, this is real. You're still breathing. That's enough today. Another inside the glove compartment of the car. You hate this car. Please sell it. Take the train. You always liked people. Watching. One inside a winter coat she hadn't worn in years. Let this warm you twice. Each note was timed, not by date, but by emotion. They surfaced when she needed them, as if he had written them knowing the exact moment she'd fall apart. He hadn't just left memories. He left permission. In the attic, she found the box. Old, unlabeled, dusty. Inside, wax-sealed envelopes addressed to their children. Some marked with years, others with events. To Jamie on the day you fall in love. To Ada after your first real failure. To Ben when you become a father. Carol sat cross-legged on the attic floor, holding the box against her chest like it could bring back his voice. She didn't open them. She didn't need to. Not yet. It took weeks to notice. No more bills. No letters from the bank. No mortgage statements. She called the bank to ask about a payment plan. The woman on the other end paused. Mrs. Johnson, the house is paid off. She sat in silence, hand on the phone, staring at the wall. Then she whispered, Of course it is. Carol opened the garage one morning and gasped. The tools were perfectly organized. Labels, instructions, clean, sharpened, oiled, a full inventory hanging on the wall. It looked like a catalogue. On the table was a sticky note. You'll never use half of this, but I couldn't throw it away. Not yet. She stood in that doorway for a long time. Then, for the first time since he died, she laughed. She took the drive he once did, the long coastal road, alone this time. The sun was rising behind her, the ocean roaring ahead. She didn't cry. She rolled down the window and let the air whip her hair into a tangle he would have teased her for. When she reached the bluff, there was nothing waiting there, and yet everything was. She opened the final envelope, mailed to her weeks after the funeral. Take the trip, I'm already there. Time moved. It always does. Grief changed shapeless, like a weight, more like a shadow. Carol didn't move on. That phrase always felt wrong. She moved forward with him, stitched into the lining of every day. Sometimes she found herself smiling for no reason. Sometimes she found another note in the back of a book or under a floorboard. Each one was a spark, not from the past, but from a version of him who believed in her future. Mr. Johnson never left all at once. He left the way melodies do note by note, pause by pause, echoing long after the music stops. And in that silence, Carol learned that grief is not where love ends. It's where it keeps growing, gently, in yellow paper, in sweater threads, in every ordinary moment he prepared for her to survive.